Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Turning Point, a virtual conversation about pivotal moments for individuals in the ag biological space, sponsored by our friends at TerraSim. I'm your host, Rhiannon Branch with Brownfield Ag News, and joining me today is Allison Jack. Allison, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks, Rhiannon. I'm Allison Jack. I'm the product technical manager at NewLeaf Symbiotics. I've been at NewLeaf about 4 years now. First 2 years in the R&D team, second 2 years in the commercial team, and in my current role, I support our sales team. I manage a lot of our commercial and customer trialing, and I do a lot of technical training of both our sales teams and also the sales teams of some of our strategic partners. And I'm also supporting some of our expansion into specialty crops. So it's a startup and we wear lots of hats.
Allison, like many of our Turning Point speakers, you have a very unique background that kind of led you to this position. Go ahead and kind of kick us off with how you got involved with biologicals.
Sure. So my biologicals journey started like in the early 2000s. I've been in the biologicals field for a while. So I was outside of college. I had an undergrad in biology with a focus in plant physiology, and I was in a lab that did a little bit of symbiosis work in terms of nitrogen fixing bacteria in soybeans and that symbiosis. And I was always kind of intrigued about plant microbe interactions. We didn't have a microbiology program at the time at my undergrad college, but a microbiology professor came in my senior year and did a journal club. I joined that journal club and I was like, oh no, okay, like plants, and then I was like microbes. And so very excited to combine those things together. And immediately after college, I was an AmeriCorps volunteer in the Portland public school system in Oregon. And it was a unique middle school, a environmental science middle school. Part of my role there was to manage their waste, like recycling and composting systems, and to do some like integration into the science curriculum. So that was really my first experience with worm composting or vermicomposting, and it became like a 10-year obsession for me. And as part of the AmeriCorps program, they did offer some professional development support for volunteers. So I attended an Earthworms and Ecotechnology conference in Portland in 2000. And I learned all of this cool stuff about how the microbes in compost can protect plants from disease. And that's exactly what I wanted to do in grad school. So I ended up very fortunately in one of the few institutions for grad school where there was a lab that focused primarily on how the microbial communities in compost can protect plants from disease. So very, very happy to have that chain of random events. So.
Definitely. So looking back at that chain of events to where you are now, what would you say stands out as kind of a major turning point maybe in your professional career?
I think for me, I can kind of nail it down to one conference and some of my experience during my postdoc in the Netherlands. I was so interested in the research. I hadn't really considered like, what am I going to do as a career afterwards, right? So during my postdoc, I had the opportunity to attend a biopesticides and a conventional seed treatment conference in Amsterdam. And I heard that Pam Marone of Marone Bioinnovations was going to be the keynote speaker. And I reached out to her beforehand, and she very graciously agreed to meet me for coffee before her keynote. And I was just so intrigued about industry careers, right? In graduate training, we don't always learn a lot about industry careers, especially in the US. So I was kind of really intrigued. And shortly after that, I got a phone call from a stealth mode startup in the US that was recruiting plant microbe interaction folks for a plant microbiome startup. And I think had I not learned a little bit about what that industry looked like and also had the opportunity to collaborate with a startup during my dissertation, those two things kind of melded together. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Stealth mode startup, like, let's do it. So
I love how those, those events kind of band together and then you look back and you're like, wow, that was like a defining moment. I feel like in the the ag biological space, many people, farmers included, can kind of recall a time where they started to believe in this technology or start to use it. Obviously for you, that came pretty early on, but I guess we can kind of flip it for you, Allison. What would you say was the turning point for you when you kind of started to look at biologicals from the agriculture perspective?
Well, I mean, there've been a few, but the one that really stands out so much in my mind, I've always believed in this technology because I've had the ability to handle it myself and to generate research data myself for many, many years now. And for me, I was so pleasantly surprised at Commodity Classic in 2020. I was really expecting the hard conversation with growers. Like, okay, this is a biological, and like, I know it's kind of new, but here's our data. I had the opposite experience where, and again, my background was specialty crops, small farmers, and all the on-farm research that I did in grad school was like on very small farms and with like tomatoes. So for me to be at like one of the largest like conventional row crop trade shows in the whole world, and to know, one, that there were 30 other biological companies there, and that growers were coming up to us and not needing anything to get them over that hump of adoption of just like, hey, I'm interested. The only thing that I don't know is there are 30 of you here, maybe 3 to 5 of your products work, and apparently I'm going to have to test them all myself to find out, because it's really hard to know, without third-party testing or a lot of extension, university extension work, what growers should be picking up. So in this case, it's been so great to work with growers as researchers and as like co-developers of this technology for row crops.
So since you've been on kind of this row crop side of things, what has your journey with biologicals looked like since then in your role with NewLeaf?
Well, I would say like learning a lot about commercial scale trialing. So I had, I would say maybe 6 seasons of small plot trialing under my belt where, okay, I'm very comfortable with the randomized complete block design. You've got multi-locations, all the protocols are the same, so you can analyze them together. I was very comfortable with those types of trials and analyzing and interpreting those types of data. And I think what's been so exciting for me at NewLeaf is when I joined the commercial team, we started doing the larger scale commercial trial testing. So what if it's 40 acres by 40 acres or 80 acres, that's a split planter? And then how do you handle that kind of data? How do you analyze and interpret it? How do you look at within field variability, across geography variability, and all of that? So it's been really exciting to be working like on landscape scale types of data, as well as our traditional small plot, which is earlier in our screening pipeline.
So you've been working with biologicals for most of your life, Allison. How do you feel like biologicals, or even the perception of biologicals, has changed in the past couple of decades?
It's changed so much. Even looking back on grad school, I mean, I saw a lot of my peers in the department that I was in, and it was primarily, traits, and chemistries, and, people who had a clear eye on an industry kind of path that they wanted to take. And for me, I was following like a research passion. Like I said before, not certain of if there even was an industry that I could get into. So I had kind of some early glimmerings. We had a couple of guest speakers from Novozymes and other places in our department seminar. But I think like if you had even gone back to grad school me, quite a few years ago and said, oh yeah, not only is there an industry within this space, but you'll get a chance to help build it, like I would not have believed you. So it's been kind of a thrilling ride and a bit of a roller coaster, but I wouldn't change any of it.
So would you say you've seen maybe an increase in, like research and funding for these type projects over the years as well?
I think so, yeah. And that's what's really behind. So I mean, if you think about the current tools in a grower toolbox, if you think about the decades of fundamental research and then applied research and all of, public funding and private funding that went into those technologies, biologicals are definitely playing catch up. And small companies like ours are having to do some of the fundamental research ourselves because it simply doesn't exist. I mean, we can go to the literature for a lot of things that we need, but a lot of it, it's like, well, I guess we're figuring that out. And I guess we're generating that data set. So I think the funding situation has changed for the better. And there's some great groups like the Phytobiomes Alliance and others. I think also the Ag Microbiomes Network that are trying to get industry and universities together to advocate for why this kind of fundamental research is so important to fund so that we can build on it and develop the technology.
Allison, do you feel like biologicals are a turning point for agriculture in general?
I do. It's a totally different paradigm from how we have been viewing a lot of crop production. And it's not without hurdles. Again, we have to figure out still a lot of consistency and performance and all of that industry wide. But I think biologicals are here to stay, and I really do believe that they are a permanent tool in the grower's toolbox, and that there will just continue to be more of them for both biostimulants and biocontrol, and a lot of the different production constraints that growers are dealing with.
For those who are kind of considering biologicals in the ag space, but haven't necessarily reached their turning point or taken that next step, do you have any advice or information for those folks to kind of help them go ahead and, check the box on biologicals?
I mean, I would say talk to someone who's using it, right? And the interesting part of that is um, because of how some products have been rolled out with larger companies, there are products that growers may already be using that they may not even be aware that the biological is in it, is part of the active ingredient. A lot of the marketing has focused on the benefit that the product gives, and the problems that it solves, but not necessarily headlining with like, oh yeah, and by the way, this year we added a biological to the mixture, and this is what we think that part specifically does. So I would say if someone's new to it, one, start reading some of the labels on the products you're already using, and you may be surprised. You may actually be using a biological already. And then start talking to people who have been early adopters. I feel like we are so lucky with the grower advocates that we have that, like I said, are really developing this technology in partnership with us. And I always learn a lot talking with them. They're the ones actually using it out in the real world. So, you can read everything you want in the scientific literature, which is exciting and interesting, but talking to someone about their experience with it is a great place to start.
This might be the most basic question, but one that I still don't feel that I can answer properly. And so I'm going to run it by you. As a scientist in this area, explaining it to a farmer, what is a biological?
Whew. You're gonna hit me with that one, huh? Okay, well, I mean, it depends on so many different definitions. So the current regulatory environment in the US, there are specific categories like a biostimulant, a growth regulator, a biocontrol agent. In my view, or at least the portion of biologicals that I've most worked with are living, naturally occurring microorganisms that live in symbiosis with the plant and that can provide some sort of benefit. And I would say almost all of them, you're talking about multiple modes of action, because that's a question I get a lot when I'm speaking with sales teams or growers. Okay, well, how does it work? And the answer is how much time do you have, right? Because it's doing multiple things at once, which is complex and fascinating, but also a little difficult to convey. So yeah, but I would say naturally occurring microorganism, either a bacteria or a fungus, that lives in association with the plant and can provide some sort of measurable phenotypic benefit.
Definitely. And I think you hit it right there. And that's what most people have how they have described it. But in this series, I don't know that we had really touched on it. And you get into that deep science side of it, and we start to lose people. And really, it's just naturally occurring. And that's
Yeah.
really what people need to keep in mind. Let's kind of look forward here, Allison. What do you see for the future of ag biologicals, or what would you like to see?
My hope for the future, again, is more funding for the fundamental research that the industry needs in order to take the higher steps of developing the technology, and really rethinking training, right? Thinking 10 years ahead. If the industry takes off as much as it has been taking off, imagining how many new people you would need to fill roles in companies, and to think about how they were trained coming up through agronomy and horticulture, and to make sure that the biologicals are really integrated into all parts of training, from the sales team to the scientists to everyone working at the company, that somewhere at some point in their education or training, that like they actually had someone mention biologicals and go through some of the fundamentals. Because I know, at least when I was an undergrad and a graduate student at an ag university, I had to go seeking that information. It was not necessarily part of just the general track curriculum. So I do a lot of speaking. Like, it's dangerous to say this, but I always say yes if someone says, come speak to my class. I have got a bunch of college students taking this class. Can you come and talk about careers in industry? And I usually say yes. And I love everyone's interest and fascination with that. And I usually say, like, well, maybe I'll see you out here in the wild in 4 to 5 years, right? Because everyone that's currently in school right now is going to end up out here with us, building all of this together. So yeah, that's my hope for the future, is we rethink some of our training, we rethink some of how we're funding fundamental research on the plant microbiome, and continuing to develop everything with all stakeholders involved.
From your perspective, Allison, what more could be done there? Obviously, you do trainings with NewLeaf, working with biologicals, maybe from a broader scale, broader industry scale. Where can education and outreach for this technology kind of expand? And for those who want to learn more, where can we point them?
Well, I mean, I would say like internships are very powerful, right? And something that struck me a lot about my experience in the Netherlands is that Wageningen Research University, they have a mandatory 6-month industry internship as part of their master's program. And I think that's fantastic. Like, if you want to know what kind of skills you need in industry, why not stick your toe in a little bit and see what it's like, and then make your decisions on your career path. So I have to say, at NewLeaf, I've been so impressed. I believe, so we share a building with the St. Louis Community College and their biotech program at the Bridge Park building. And I believe we have 9 full-time employees that were first interns when they were in that community college program. So like, again, I mean, I think about all of the summer interns and other types of interns. We've had PhD interns that are now current employees. I think about all of the training and perspective that all of those people have gotten from the direct experience of doing an industry internship. And I think, like, even if a company doesn't have one, call them up, right? I mean, one of our current scientists, we had an undergrad internship program and a community college internship program. We did not have a PhD level internship program, but she just approached us and said, like, I'm interested, and we made a program. So don't be shy to network and reach out and show that entrepreneurial spirit and say, like, hey, I'm interested in what your company does, and I'm curious if you have any internship openings, and like, I want to learn more about what it is that you do.
Great. Well, Allison, I think that answers kind of all the questions I had on this topic. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or any final remarks for everybody?
Well, I mean, thanks, Rhiannon, for this great series. I've really enjoyed watching all of them, and this has been a great conversation. And just, I mean, to walk away with the feeling that it's so exciting to be building this industry and to be working directly with our customers on developing and learning about these products. So it's an exciting time. And like I said, if anyone had said to grad school and me, not only is there an industry, but you'll get to do all of this fun stuff within it, I wouldn't have believed them. So it's fun to look back on that and to be like super happy with how things turned out. So.
Definitely. Well, Allison, we thank you for your time and your insight and sharing your story with us. That wraps up this episode of Turning Point then. To learn more about our sponsor, TerraSym and NewLeaf Symbiotics, you can go to their website. That's www.terrasym2022.com. This video will be available to view on demand on our website. That's brownfieldagnews.com. And you can tune in next Thursday at noon for the next episode of Turning Point. See you all then.